Welcome to the Great Canadian Wilderness. We are like an hour from a cop or a sidewalk or a street light. And it's a bit cold, but my wife is inside. She's a professional voice actor, so I decided to come outside and do a little video. So this is on multisampling. Going to give you the basics. For number one, if you're trying to multisample an acoustic instrument, it is extremely difficult and extremely involved. Best to be left to the professionals. Because, for instance, maybe you want to record a violin. You might record every note, different volumes, so that when you're playing, you can actually create dynamics. And then, is it arco bowing, marcato bowing? Is it pizzicato? It is just so complex. You end up with a file management nightmare because you have a bunch of different velocity layers per note, all based on whatever kind of bowing you're doing. Some acoustic instruments, when they sample them, they do the downstroke with a pick and an upstroke, and then they do round robin. Well, what is round robin? It means that every time you trigger a sample, you're not triggering the same sample over and over again, because our ear can hear that, and it sounds odd, sounds synthetic. A lot of sample companies will do multiple attacks of each note and a round robin, so you're not hearing the same one over and over again. So it sounds like someone actually playing an instrument where there's more variation. So you get the idea, it becomes very complicated. Talking about velocity, back when I started sampling in the 80s, there was basically what was called a velocity crossfade. You have the quiet and the loud, and that was about it. Nothing in between. Now, there's lots of nuance where you're triggering a sample and you're triggering a bunch of different samples depending on how loud you play. It either triggers a different sample. It figures out that a velocity of 48 would have this sample and a velocity of 52 would have this, and sometimes they actually synthesize between them. Very complicated. So what I want to talk about more is sampling synthesizers. You've got a great sound, you love it, but you don't want to take that piece of gear on the road. Or you want to be able to sell a patch bank to somebody with the sounds of a really rare, old, vintage, analog, whatever. Then it comes into how many samples do you want to have of that one sound? Do you want to have one sample per note? If it's just like a sound design thing you're doing, you can have one cool sample and you can actually pitch it up or down when you play it back. If you want an accurate sample of a synthesizer or something, you need to do multi-sampling. Some sampling, they'll actually sample every individual note of an instrument. With a synthesizer, you don't necessarily have to do that. You can do every few notes, so the pitch of one gets stretched up or down a little bit. The other thing is when you have an extended sound, like a pad sound, you're either going to have a really long sample, which could be 30 seconds, a minute, or you're going to have a sound that gets looped within that. The other thing that is common if you're trying to do really accurate representations of different samples is within that looping, you have an attack. Then there is some part of that sample that loops for as long as you hold the note down. Now that could be a long loop even, so your ear's never going to hear it. And then when you let go of the key, it will play the remainder of that sample in case the decay sounds different than just a bit of amplitude falling off. So if you want to multi-sample a synthesizer, you have to figure out how many samples you want across the keyboard, and then if it's a synthesizer that has velocity, you may want to sample different velocity levels. So once again, you have to be very organized about how you name them, make sure that you have all the different volumes of all the different notes, and then you have to organize that in whatever you're playing a sample back at. So it's very involved, takes a lot of time and energy, and you really have to be organized. There is help available. Things like Sample Robot, which is a piece of software. You say, I want this synth patch, I want this many velocity layers, and I want this many notes. And it automates the whole thing. It uses your sound card and your synthesizer, and it goes in and automates this. You just click a button. It automatically plays all the different volumes of all the different notes, organizes them, puts the loops together. I think there's like 3 or 4 different versions of Sample Robot, depending on how involved you want to get. But look it up, because it's if you want to sample a bunch of gear to create maybe a patch library for a sampler of some sort, that would be the way to do it. Their system is fast and accurate. So what I'm going to show you today is how to multi-sample something using a single velocity for the Deluge. And I'm doing this video because a lot of Deluge users are approaching me saying, I love those samples you have. How do you do that? And so I want to talk you through that. Now, the Deluge is quite limited. You can't crossfade. It doesn't have that option. I'm just going to show you the basics of multisampling a synthesizer for use in the Deluge and a couple of tricks that I found to make it quicker and more accurate. One of the great things about using the Deluge as a multi-sample player is you go and you take all of your samples of your synthesizer, like one particular patch, and you might take 20, 30, depending on how accurately you want to represent that sound across the keyboard. You put them in a folder and you upload them into the Deluge, and it figures out what the note is and lays them out. A lot of other gear out there that plays samples, you have to tell it, this is an A, this is a C, this is a C octave 2. So the Deluge is really brilliant in that you just upload a folder. The samples can be called 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, doesn't matter. And it just takes them, analyzes them, it figures out how many samples you have and how many octaves are covered, and it does the whole thing for you. It's brilliant, it's lightning fast, and that's one of the things that makes the Deluge such a great piece of gear for just triggering other samples. As you've seen and heard, if you watch some of my videos, I've got a lot of really great sounds from really other cool pieces of gear in my Deluge, which is small and portable. I'm gonna go inside where it's warm. I'm gonna show you a few of my tips and tricks from multi-sampling, building an instrument in the Deluge. Thanks for your time. Okay, so I found a sound that I want to multi-sample. I'm picking something in Omnisphere, and I'm working in Final Cut Pro as my DAW. So here's the sound. And let me just play one quick note. And you can hear instantly that there's way too much reverb on there. Let's just turn off all the effects and listen to the same thing again. Okay. So you can hear it's the reverb that's the problem there. So we're just going to tighten this up so there's not as much of a reverb tail. Let's hear that quick note again. That's better. Okay. So here's our sound. The other thing you want to check is your release time. Some samples or synthesizers have a really long release, and you don't want it to go on for, way too long if you're just trying to sample a short note. Okay, that seems good. Now, let's just close this for now. Here is my big tip, secret thing that I took forever to learn. I have created, kind of looks like a sequence in the piano roll here. But what this is a series of the notes that I want to sample. And you can see I'm not doing every note. Let's go down a little lower in the sound. I can have octaves and octaves of samples. And then when I want to record something, I can just decide how many of these to do. Do I want to do 2 octaves? Do I want to do 6, 7 octaves? But let's see what happens when I actually play this. Just watch the cursor here. So you see the sustain time of the sound is not going to last for this whole thing. So I just go up here. This is my beats per minute, my clock for my DAW, and I just speed it up, way up here. I'm going to go up to like 300 beats per minute or something. And now I'm just going to hit play again. So I'm getting just about the lengths that I want. But with this simple thing that I've set up like this, you can just go through the DAW, and if you want this one recording of each note to be a minute, you just slow your DAW way down. I've also got a different version of this in which each note is maybe just a half a second, like a really quick instance of each note, just in case I'm doing plucks, bells, really quick sounds, and I don't want to have this long time. So now it's pretty simple to just go, in Logic they call it bounce, but basically what I'm doing is I'm recording everything that's on this track. You could assume that it's just like a melody or something like this. I'm just going to record it as an audio track. Logic has a way of doing that in the background where it does it really quickly. It doesn't do it like if this was a 3-minute song, it would record that whole audio of this track in, 10 seconds or something. So let's just do this. You can hear, I can decide, do I want to do it as a MP3 or like a wave or something, or multiple at a time. And then up here, you can choose the codec, the type of wave file that you want, your sample rate, and then the bit depth. I'll say OK, and I'm just going to give it a name, test sample, and I'm just going to put it right on the desktop here so it's easy to find. Here we go. When I hit bounce, it's going to record a bunch of these notes in the background. You can see it working up there. The great thing about this system is I can call up any sound. I can create a custom sound. I can call it up and instantly so it's very easy to sample any sound once you've built this as a template, and you just keep this on hand, call it up, throw a new sound into it, and you've found a way to at least now create audio snippets of all the notes that you want, all the same length, all the same velocity. So now we're going to look at the second part of my little hack or trick for multisampling, the secret weapon. Twisted Wave. For anybody who doesn't know about Twisted Wave, it's an amazing digital audio recording piece of software. It has been around I've been using it for about 12 or 13 years. It is really affordable. It is very powerful, and it has a lot of features. But the main thing is that you can very quickly get around and do stuff. You can zoom in on a sample. So I'm going to open that sample that I just did. So these are the notes that I recorded. Individual notes of that sound, different keys. So the first thing you'll see is that there's nice space between them. They're individually done. And I can just zoom right in and very clearly look at any part of the sample. Very quickly get right in there and right out. See, it's great. You can very quickly move around. This could be an audio sample that is hours long, but you can really quickly move from one section of it to another, move right into, see every little bit of the sound. Totally see the waveform. You can also do things. You can select some of it, and then there are any types of plugins that you can use. You can use any of your digital audio plugins from other software that you have, or just stuff that resides on the computer. It's all available to you here as a plugin. It's also very easy to, within this, to do things like you can convert the sample rate to, if you want to go from 44.1 to 48 or anything else. It is now available on the PC as well as the Mac. It used to be Mac exclusively. It's very affordable, and there's a 30-day free trial that is completely fully featured. It's also available for the iPhone, the iPad. As far as single channel or stereo channel audio editing, I don't know of anything that is as efficient and easy to use as Twisted Wave. So here's what we've got. One audio file divided down into a couple of dozen notes. And what I want to do is divide those up into individual audio files. So here's how I do it. First of all, zoom right in, find the beginning of every note, and put a marker on it. Now, I'm just going to do it here. I can do it with a keystroke. I can automate that. So there's my first sound. Then I go to the next one, roughly, I'm just zooming in to where it starts, and I just hit a keystroke and put another marker there. If I want to find it and I'm having a hard time, I can also go like this, and I can go move to next transient, and it finds it for me. But I'm going to zoom in there and get it even closer. And I hit a keystroke. So you can see very quickly I'm putting markers at the beginning of every note within that this big piece of audio. Another great thing about Twisted Wave is it allows you to do what's called batch processing. So you could open 30 different audio files and say, you know what, I want to do X to them, like whether it's adding an effect or compression or changing a sample rate or whatever, and it'll do it all automatically. Automate that process in the background in just a matter of seconds, even if you've got, I've done it sometimes where I've had, 100 files and I wanted to go through and convert them to whatever, to a different codec or something like this, and it automates the whole process. So once again, very powerful, very affordable. And when you have a file in Twisted Wave, you can save it. You go here to save it, and you can go, look at this, all of these different codecs of audio. And then within that, you can choose a bit depth or a bit rate, depending on what kind of audio you're doing. Anyway, so just wanted to show you that as another great feature. Okay, now that that's done, this is another automated feature. I go marker, split by markers. Okay, and now ask me, I can change the name of them if I want or number them, and I'm just going to turn them into WAV files. So now I can take this folder of samples onto an SD card and load it into my Deluge. And now here's what we have to do to create a new synth on the Deluge. Push a couple of buttons and then navigate to the folder. There it is, sample test. I push a button. It tells me there are multiple files, and I just hit this button to confirm. Done. I generally go in and add some release here. And now we're ready to play. Crystal clear stereo samples, and the Deluge has automatically organized it and assigned them to the right notes. I haven't had to do anything like that. Anyway, that's it for this time. Thanks. Hope you enjoyed it.